Hello and welcome to this episode of Sobremesa. We're so glad that you joined us for this conversation. Today our guest is Lieutenant Colonel Carolee Israel, and she is the Divisional Commander for the newly created Potomac Division for the Salvation Army. Thank you so much for joining us. So, Miss Israel.
Yes.
Glad that you're here in our new studio. You are our second guest here to do that. And we have an honor of you. We have your name up there as,
my name
as a
on the
guest.
wall.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And so we're so glad that you're here with us. And we've talked a little bit about the concept of Sobremesa, and really we're just to have a conversation and talk about your life as a Salvation Army officer and what has that meant to you. And so we're just here to talk a little bit about you and just to get to know you a bit. So tell us about your growing up years.
Okay. Well, that's an easy story to tell. My parents are retired now Salvation Army officers. So I was born into the Salvation Army. But more than that, I was raised in the Salvation Army. I was part of a community of faith all my life. I had good Sunday school teachers who loved and cared for me. I had good youth leaders who reined me in when I needed to be reined in and who prodded me along when I didn't want to go. Yeah. I had all of that. I grew up in church. I grew up singing in the choir and in the Salvation Army, playing in the band. So all part of those communities of faith were part of my growing up years. So as the child of Salvation Army officers, I also moved a lot.
Yeah.
And so for me, my home, I was born in Chicago, Illinois, and grew up in the Midwest. But for me to move from place to place was really rather difficult because by nature, I'm an introvert. So I do much better talking to folks one-on-one, but you put me in a room full of people I don't know, and I'll just, because I was part of the Salvation Army and that community of faith, it didn't matter where it was, I still had Sunday school teacher who loved me, or a youth leader who took me under her wing, or a group of friends who played in the band like I played in the band. And so that really became the world that shaped who I am today. Now, a lot of officers' kids grow up saying, "Oh, I'll never be a Salvation Army officer," and I certainly was one of those.
Well, here you are.
And here I am now, many years later,
just a few,
proving that statement's not always true, because I felt some of the difficulties. I admit, it was very difficult for me to move and transition from city to city and state to state. I even moved. My parents were transferred when I was a senior in high school. So my last year in high school was a brand new school with nobody that I knew, and so I've always felt that. And so I never dreamed of being a Salvation Army officer, not at all. I went to college for something totally different, and in the middle of all of that, God got a hold of me. Yeah. And stirred within me this, what are my gifts and what do I want to do with my life? Not what do I want to do in life, but what do I want to make a difference in some way? And so God just really started working in my life. And eventually I recognized his voice in my life and his call to me for Salvation Army officership. So I actually trained as a Salvation Army officer in Chicago, because that's the area in which I was living at the time. And my husband was going to college in Iowa, and so that's actually how we met, and that's a whole different story, because he is from Atlanta, and he is a Southern boy. He is a Southern boy, for sure. And but my years as a Salvation Army officer are really formed by those early years of a faith community. We often say in our culture, it takes a village, to get anything done. Raise a kid, start a business, whatever. And for me, that really was my formative years. And so I'm so thankful to the Lord that the village that I was born into was one of faith. Now, did I have to figure out faith for myself? Yeah. And that was actually my crisis moment was that senior year in high school, where faith became my own. Now I am a Salvation Army officer and I'm impacting lives. I know what that's like to feel like you belong and you feel like there's a place that's safe
Yeah.
and a place where I can make mistakes,
Yeah.
a place that correction is given in love, and I can grow up feeling like I've been heard. I can speak my mind, and but knowing that there are people around me who care more about me than maybe some days I care about myself.
Gotcha.
And so for my officership, that's always been my approach. Didn't matter our assignment, didn't matter our appointment, whether it was directly leading a congregation or in administration, it's always been about the community. It's always been about making sure people belong, making sure people have been heard, correcting them when they need correcting, instructing them when they don't know, and applauding them as they succeed. But where I find my true energy is when I've been to a Salvation Army event, similar to the one we had just past Saturday with our youth, almost 400. We had almost 400 young people together. And when I'm in a place like that, even though I'm an introvert, in that moment, there's purpose and there's meaning to what I do, and there's outcomes that I may never see, but I believe in. I believe that there were miracles that happened on Saturday that I just haven't seen yet. Yeah. And that's energy enough for me to get up and go back to the office the next day.